All right, let me ask you something. And be honest with yourself for just a second. How many people do you know who started in January on fire and are already gone? No announcement, no dramatic, I quit. They just faded. The gym got quieter. The group chat slowed down. The goals that felt loud and exciting a few weeks ago suddenly feel awkward to talk about. And here's the thing, if that's you, I want you to hear me clearly right now. You're not weak. You didn't fail, and nothing is wrong with you. You've just arrived at a part of the year where most people never prepared for. See, earlier this month, we talked about what happens when reality shows up. Then, we blew up the lie of new year, new you, and exposed why motivation alone never works. And now we're standing at the exact moment where most people quietly disappear. Not because it's impossible, but because it got normal. The excitement wears off. Life picks back up. And suddenly, the version of you that felt so clear on January 1st feels distant. This is where people start telling themselves stories like, maybe this just isn't my year. I'll start again later. I already messed it up. Why should I keep going? And slowly, without even realizing it, they stop showing up for themselves. So if you're listening to this right now, I don't think it's an accident. Because even if your momentum slowed, even if you stumbled, you didn't disappear. You showed up right here, right now, with me. And today isn't about shaming you back into action or hyping you up with empty words. It's about giving you something better, something real. We're going to talk about why most people vanish at this point of the year and what actually causes it, and how you can stay in the room when things get quiet, boring, or uncomfortable. No pressure, no perfection. Just a conversation like you're sitting across from me right now on the couch realizing, oh, this is the part that actually matters. All right, are you ready? I am. I'm Jonah. I'm your person. Let's get to it. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. If you haven't already listened to the first two installments of this three-part series on New Year, New You, please take a listen. I believe all three give you staying power. All right, we're going to talk about disappearing doesn't look like quitting here in part one. Here's something nobody really tells you. Most people don't disappear by walking away. They disappear by staying physically present, but mentally checked out. They're still going to work. They're still handling responsibilities. They're still showing up for everyone else. But the part of them that cared, the part that believed, the part that was willing to try again, that part slowly quiets. Disappearing rarely looks like giving up completely. It looks like skipping just this once, or lowering the standard for now. Telling yourself you'll come back when it comes to life calming down. And at first, it feels reasonable. You say things like, I'm just tired, or it's been busy, or I've been busy, or I'll lock back in next week. But weeks pass, then months, and one day you realize you didn't consciously quit. You just stopped choosing yourself. That's the real danger zone. Because when people disappear this way, they don't feel dramatic failure. They feel numb distance from the version of themselves they wanted to become. And that distance creates shame. You start thinking, why can't I just be consistent? What's wrong with me? Other people don't struggle like this. But let me reframe this for you, because this matters. What you're experiencing isn't laziness. It's the absence of a clear identity once motivation fades. Motivation is loud. Identity is quiet. Motivation shows up at the beginning of the year. Identity shows up when nobody's watching. including you. And most people were never taught how to stay connected to who they're becoming once the emotional fuel runs out. So they don't disappear because they're incapable. They disappear because they never learned how to remain present in the boring middle. If this is hitting close to home for you, good. Not because something's wrong, but because awareness just came online. And awareness is the opposite of disappearing. Right now, you're not behind. You're not broken. You're standing at a fork most people don't even realize exists. One path is autopilot, drifting, delaying, disconnecting. The other path is subtle, but powerful, staying, adjusting, and choosing to remain in the room. And in the next part, I'm going to give you some simple ways to interrupt disappearing in real time. Not with pressure, not with guilt, but with clarity. Let's keep going. All right, let's talk about the moment people start slipping away here in part 2. There's a very specific moment when disappearing actually begins, and it's quieter than most people expect. It's not the day you skip the workout. It's not the week you fall behind, and it's not the moment you start negotiating with yourself. You know the conversation. I'll do it tomorrow. I've already messed up, so what's the point today? I just need a break. And listen, rest is real. Life is real. But disappearing starts when every pause turns into permission to drift. What's tricky is that this moment feels reasonable. No alarms go off. No one calls you out. Nothing looks wrong on the outside. But internally, something important just shifted. You moved from choice to autopilot. Autopilot is comfortable. It protects you from disappointment. It keeps you and expectations low. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because the version of you that set these goals in the first place didn't disappear overnight. They just stopped being consulted. Here's the reframe I want you to sit with. Disappearing isn't a motivation problem. It's a presence problem. You don't need to feel fired up to stay in the room. You just need to notice when you're mentally checked out and come back. That's it. No speeches, no punishment, no starting over. Coming back can look boring, okay? Sending the email you've been avoiding, doing 5 minutes instead of 0, making the choice you said you would, even without excitement. This is where real change is built, not in the highs, but in the small moments where you choose to re-enter. And once you start noticing these moments, disappearing loses its power because awareness puts you back in the driver's seat. So, here is your first challenge. Keep it simple. For the next 48 hours, notice one moment where you start negotiating with yourself. When you catch it, don't do everything. Just do one small action that keeps you present. That's it. No perfection, no catching up. Just don't disappear, and we'll build from there. The boring middle is where identity is built, here in part 3. Here's the part that no one puts on the vision board. The middle. Not the excitement of starting, not the relief of finishing. The stretch in between where nothing dramatic is happening and no one is cheering. This is where most people start questioning themselves. They don't say, I quit. They say, I don't feel like myself anymore. And that feeling can mess with you because early on, the goal gave you energy. It gave you a story to tell. It gave you a version of yourself that felt alive and possible. But now it's quiet. And quiet can feel like failure if you don't know what it's for. So let me reframe this in a way that might change everything for you. The boring middle isn't the problem to escape. It's the training ground for your future identity. This is where discipline stops being forced and starts becoming familiar. Where actions stop being exciting and start being yours. Think about anything you respect in someone else. Their confidence, their calm under pressure, their consistency. None of that was built during the highlight moments. It was built when they kept showing up without applause. And here's why that matters. If you only show up when it feels good, you're training yourself to need motivation. But if you show up when it feels neutral, you're training yourself to be reliable. And reliability is power. It changes how you see yourself, and you stop asking, "Am I motivated today?" and start saying, "This is just what I do." And that shift is subtle, but it's everything. Because the people who don't disappear aren't tougher, they're not more inspired. They just learn how to stay in the room when nothing exciting is happening. And if you're right here, right now, listening, reflecting, and still curious, you are already practicing it. So you're not late, you're not behind, you're in the middle. And the middle is exactly where you're supposed to be. Here in part 4, we're going to talk about stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What does this version do?" And here's where most people get tripped up. They keep checking in with their feelings. How do I feel today? Do I feel motivated? Do I feel like showing up? And listen, feelings matter, but they are terrible leaders. Because if feelings are in charge, consistency never stands a chance. The people who don't disappear don't wake up feeling confident every day. They don't feel disciplined. They don't feel ready. They just know who they are before the feelings show up. This is the shift that changes everything. Instead of asking, "What do I feel like doing?" you ask, "What does this version of me I'm building do in this moment?" That question is calm. It's grounded. And it pulls you out of negotiation. Because identities don't argue. They act. Think about it. A reliable person doesn't debate reliability. A calm person doesn't hype themselves into calm. A disciplined person doesn't wait to be disciplined. They move first. The feeling catches up later. This is why motivation fades, but identity sticks. Motivation says, "Let's do this when it feels right." Identity says, "This is what I do," especially when it doesn't. And no, this doesn't mean pushing yourself into burnout or ignoring real limits. It means removing emotion from simple, repeatable decisions. You don't need to conquer the day. You don't need to fix everything. And you don't need to be impressive. You just need to act in alignment once. One email, one rep, one honest conversation, one small follow through. That's how identity gets reinforced. Not by intensity, but by agreement between who you say you are and what you actually do. And the more often those two match, the less likely you are to disappear. Because now, you're not chasing a feeling, you're living a standard. All right, here's your next challenge. Today or tomorrow, when you feel like resistance, ask yourself one question. What would the version of me I respect do next? Then, do one small action that answers it. Not everything, just one. That's how you stay in the room. And we're building from here. Let's get to it. When you don't see results, don't change the process. Here in part 5. This is usually where frustration sneaks in. You've started showing up again. You're making better choices. You're staying present instead of disappearing. But the results? They're not obvious yet. And that's a dangerous territory. Because when people don't see progress fast enough, they assume something's wrong. They start tweaking everything, switching approaches, second-guessing themselves. Not because the process is bad, but because the silence makes them uncomfortable. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Results lag behind identity. Always. The internal shift happens first. The external evidence comes later. But we live in a world that rewards visibility, not patience. So when nothing looks different on the outside, people panic. They think, maybe this isn't working. Maybe I should start doing something else. Maybe I'm wasting my time. And that's when consistency quietly dies. Not from laziness, but from impatience. So let me give you a reframe that might save you weeks or months. If the process is sound, don't abandon it just because it gets quiet. Silence doesn't mean stagnation. It means roots are growing. You don't dig up a seed every day to check to see if it's working. You water it. You give it time. You trust the process. And this is especially important right now because this episode isn't about dramatic transformation. It's about staying with the process, staying with yourself, staying committed when no one's clapping yet. If you keep changing the plan every time you feel uncertain, you'll never stay long enough to benefit from any of it. Look, consistency isn't stubbornness. It's patience with purpose. And if you're feeling restless or doubtful right now, that doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're early. And early always feels uncomfortable. Next up, part 6 is where we lock this with a powerful challenge, one that helps you measure progress without needing external results. You're doing better than you think. Let's get to it. Part 6. Measure what actually matters. By now, you've probably noticed something. You're thinking differently. You're choosing differently. You're staying in the room more often. But what if you're being honest? You might still be asking yourself, is this actually working? That question gets a lot of good people to quit because they're measuring the wrong thing. Most people measure progress by visible results. Did the scale move? Did the numbers change? Did someone notice? Did it feel big? But here's the shift that separates people who disappear from people who don't. The people who stay measure behavior, not outcomes. They don't ask, did I win today? They ask, did I show up as who I said I would be? That's a radically different scoreboard because outcomes are delayed, but behavior is immediate. You don't control when results arrive. You do control whether you acted in alignment today. And alignment compounds quietly, softly, reliably. This is where self-trust is built. Every time you do what you said you would, even in a small way, you deposit something into your own credibility account. You start believing yourself again. And when you believe yourself, disappearing becomes harder because now there's something at stake. Your word to yourself. That's the part most people underestimate. They don't quit because they don't care. They quit because they stop trusting themselves. So instead of chasing proof that it's working, start collecting evidence that you're reliable. That's the foundation everything sits upon. And once that foundation is solid, results have somewhere to land. And here's your next challenge. For the next 3 days, track one thing only. Did I do what I said I would do today? Even in a small way. No judging, no fixing, just notice. Because consistency starts with honesty, and honesty keeps you in the room. Part 7. The people who stay change everything. Let's zoom out for a moment, because this entire series, all 3 installments of New Year, New You, was never really about goals. It was about what happens when life stops being loud, when the excitement fades, when nobody's checking, and when the mirror is the only witness. That's where most people disappear. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to stay connected to themselves without momentum carrying them. And now, if you've been listening throughout this episode, I want you to really hear this. You are not the person who disappears. Even if you've slowed down, and even if you doubted yourself, or even if you've drifted for a moment, you came back. That matters more than any streak, any number, any perfect plan. Because the people who change their lives aren't the ones who never fall off. They're the ones who refuse to abandon themselves. They return. They adjust. They stay. That's the difference. This is why New Year, New You was never the point. You don't need a new personality. You don't need a total overhaul. And you certainly don't need to become someone unrecognizable. You need continuity. You need self-trust. You need the quiet confidence that says, I'm someone who stays even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when there's no one clapping. And here's the part I hope you carry with you after this episode ends. Every time you choose presence over autopilot, every time you act in alignment instead of emotion, and every time you keep your word to yourself in a small way, you are becoming someone that you can rely on. That version of you that doesn't disappear. They don't ghost themselves. They don't wait for January to begin again. They just keep showing up. So, wherever you are right now, whether that's mid-January, late January, or somewhere in between, you're not late. You're not behind. You're practicing the part that actually lasts. And if this series did anything, I hope it reminded you of this. You don't need a restart. You need a return. And you already know how to do that. Stay in the room. You've got this. I believe in you. Now believe in yourself. If you're still here right now, I want you to pause for a second and just acknowledge that. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a pat yourself on the back kind of way. Just notice. Because staying, especially when things get quiet, is a skill most people were never taught. And yet, here you are. This episode wasn't about pushing harder or demanding more from yourself. It was about learning how to remain present when the noise fades and the spotlight moves. That's not flashy, but it's powerful. Over the last few weeks, we talked about what happens when reality shows up, and we challenged the lie of New Year, New You. And today, we named that moment most people disappear and gave you a way to stay. Not perfectly, not intensely, just honestly. So as you move forward from here, I don't want you thinking about the whole year. Don't worry about where it ends. Don't stress about whether you're on track. Just focus on this. When life gives you a chance to drift, return. When you feel the urge to disappear, stay. When you don't know how and what to do next, do the smallest thing that keeps you present. That's how self-trust is rebuilt. That's how confidence becomes quiet and real. And that's how momentum forms without force. And if at any point you feel like you're dipping or you're slipping, remember this. Disappearing isn't failure. Staying is a choice. You don't need a new beginning. You don't need permission. And you don't need to wait for motivation to show up. You just need to come back. So wherever you're listening from, your car, your room, your walk, your commute, take this with you. You're not behind. You're not broken. And you're not alone in this. I'm Jonah. This is Challenge Accepted with Jonah C. And if you're ready to keep showing up, quietly, consistently, imperfectly, then you're already doing the work. Before we go, real quick, if this episode hit you in any way, don't let it stop with you. The show grows because people decide to pass it on. Not because of ads, not because of hype, but because someone thought, yeah, someone I care about needs to hear this. So if you've got value here, do me a favor. Follow the show, subscribe wherever you listen, leave a review or a comment. Even a few words helps more than you think. And if you know someone who's been drifting, struggling, or trying to stay in the room, share this with them. That's how this reaches the people who need it, the ones who don't even know what to search for yet. And if you don't want to miss what's coming next, stay connected. This isn't the one-off conversation. We're building something steady here, episode by episode. See you next week when I drop a new episode. Go in peace and stay in the room.